Hello? Salt Lake Police, can you come out, please?
Hi, it's the police department.
Okay.
Are you renting this room?
Yes.
Okay. We are going to be serving a warrant on this house, so we need... Is there anyone else here?
Just me.
If you want to just grab your wallet.
I got it in my wallet.
Okay, we'll need you to come out then.
Okay.
In June 2019, 23-year-old Mackenzie Lueck vanished after meeting someone she had connected with online in Salt Lake City, Utah. As investigators worked for leads, early clues misled them, which sent the case down dead ends. False reports and misleading information stalled progress, which left her family in agony and the police with little direction. It wouldn't be until weeks later that the true horror of Mackenzie's fate was revealed. So, what really happened to Mackenzie and who was responsible for her tragic end? Let's get into the case. Mackenzie Lueck was a 23-year-old student at the University of Utah, where she was pursuing a degree in kinesiology, which was a field she was passionate about. She was described as a friendly, outgoing person with a lot of friends and a strong sense of ambition. Raised in El Segundo, California, Mackenzie had always been a high-achieving student and athlete. Her family described her as someone who always had a smile on her face, and she maintained close relationships with her loved ones. Mackenzie was also an active social media user, where she frequently posted about her college life and her hobbies. She had a popular Instagram account where she would share snapshots of her adventures, which included photos with friends, family, and her beloved dog, who she adored. Friends and family members recall that Mackenzie was a fun-loving person, with a vibrant energy that made her the life of the party. In her spare time, Mackenzie enjoyed traveling, working out, and spending time outdoors. She was passionate about fitness and loved to run. Mackenzie was an advocate for healthy living, and her desire to work in a field related to health and wellness reflected that. Many who knew her said she was an exceptionally driven individual, always working hard to achieve her goals. On June 17, 2019, Mackenzie Lueck boarded a flight from California to Salt Lake City, Utah. She had just returned to Utah after attending her grandmother's funeral in California. On the night of June 17th, she took a lift from Salt Lake City International Airport to a park near her apartment, which was located in the city's northern part. What happened next would set off a sequence of events that would leave the community shocked and worried. Mackenzie texted a close friend that evening, telling them she had arrived safely in Salt Lake City. She also mentioned that she was meeting someone in the park. The friend later recalled that Mackenzie seemed to be in good spirits, as they had planned to catch up once she was back in town. However, that was the last communication from Mackenzie. Her phone went silent, and she did not respond to texts or phone calls after that point. The next morning, when Mackenzie did not show up for work or respond to messages from her family, friends, and co-workers, concern began to grow. Her parents, who were in California, immediately contacted the police to report their daughter missing.
Last time we heard from her, she got off the plane coming back from LA. It was 1 a.m. She was going to grab an Uber and go home, but that's the last I've heard from her.
So 1 a.m. this morning?
No, 1 a.m. Monday morning. So we've been trying to get a hold of her all week. Usually it's unlike her to return a call, but it goes straight to voicemails.
The Salt Lake City Police Department launched an investigation into her disappearance. By then, it was clear that something was very wrong. The search for Mackenzie Lueck started right away. Detectives quickly started piecing together the events leading up to her disappearance. They found out that Mackenzie had ordered a Lyft ride to a park in North Salt Lake City, which is an area that was somewhat isolated and not far from her apartment.
Confirmed that this was the location where she was last seen, Hatch Park here in North Salt Lake. Investigators now revealing she met someone else after getting dropped off.
The Lyft ride was a critical piece of evidence, and it would provide investigators with the first real lead in the case.
They seemed to know each other really well because
I think all I heard was, "How are you doing? How are your trip?" Just kind of basic greetings. The situation seemed very safe.
Authorities learned that Mackenzie had left the airport at around 3 a.m. and arrived at the park at approximately 3:30 a.m. According to the Lyft driver's account, Mackenzie had exited the car and was met by a man at the park. Surveillance footage from a nearby camera showed Mackenzie and the man standing near the entrance of the park. The video footage showed them engaging in conversation before they appeared to walk off together into the darkened area of the park.
Well, I can tell you this, Hatch Park behind me is where Mackenzie Lueck asked to be taken and was dropped off by her Lyft driver 1 week ago tonight. Now, after looking at surveillance video from the area and talking to that Lyft driver, police believe she met someone there at 3 o'clock in the morning.
At this point, investigators could not identify the man Mackenzie was with. However, the surveillance footage gave authorities something to work with. They traced the Lyft ride and began looking into the person who had met her at the park. They were desperate to identify him, as he was now a key figure in the case. The police also began canvassing the area for additional surveillance footage and asking residents if they had seen anything unusual that night. As the search intensified, authorities urged anyone with information to come forward. The case made headlines across the country, and social media users joined in the search efforts and tried to help locate Mackenzie. But despite all these efforts, there were no new leads, and the case seemed to stall. A breakthrough came when investigators learned from a friend of Mackenzie's about her use of an online dating platform called Seeking Arrangement. The site, which connects wealthy individuals, often referred to as sugar daddies, with younger people, known as sugar babies, was a surprising revelation. This platform had nearly 50 million users, and Mackenzie had joined it a few months earlier. The details of her conversations on this platform were not fully clear, but it was suggested that Mackenzie might have been using the site casually, not for a serious romantic relationship, but for the possibility of meeting someone for companionship. A man named Rob, who had briefly met Mackenzie at a bar a few weeks before her disappearance, recalled an encounter where she had mentioned joining the site. According to Rob, she was chatty and friendly, and she described her past relationships. She was recently single, and the interaction at the bar seemed casual, with no indication that anything was amiss. This revelation was a turning point. Investigators learned that Mackenzie had been active on the site as recently as June 16th, just hours before she went missing. They discovered that she had paid for a plane ticket with money from men she had met through the site, and there was an unexplained deposit of $300 into her bank account by someone she had never mentioned to her family. With this new information, detectives began looking deeper into Mackenzie's online activity. They discovered that she had recently followed an Instagram page called Fatherless, which, along with phone records, led them to a phone number associated with a Salt Lake City home. This number, as it turned out, was linked to a man named Ayoola Ajayi, a 31-year-old who lived in the area. Ayoola Ajayi, born in Nigeria in 1988, moved to the U.S. with hopes of a successful future. He enrolled at Utah State University, but his time there was troubled, marked by a 2012 ban for visa issues and alleged theft. Though he returned in 2015 after resolving his visa problems, his academic and career path remained unstable. Ajayi had brief stints in IT and the Army National Guard, but he struggled to find stability. In 2018, Ajayi met Mackenzie Lueck on a dating app, but he had a history of disturbing behavior. Earlier that year, he assaulted a woman he met online and pinned her down, biting her when she tried to escape. He had also been investigated for a 2014 rape case, though the victim didn't press charges. Additionally, Ajayi had threatened his ex-wife and made disturbing requests, which included asking a contractor to build a secret soundproof room under his porch, which he claimed was to hide alcohol from his girlfriend. Reports also revealed that Ajayi had cameras set up around his home, which suggested he was obsessed with control and secrecy. According to his defense attorney, Ajayi had been in contact with Lueck before, and they had agreed to meet up when she returned to Utah. To those around her, nothing about this meeting seemed out of the ordinary. She told the Lyft driver she was meeting a friend, and she was dropped off at around 3 a.m. While the meeting might have seemed like a typical date, Ayoola Ajayi had something far more disturbing planned. He had thought through every detail of his plan before picking her up. Before Lueck's arrival, he had turned off the cameras on his home security system so that no evidence would capture her presence at his house. Ajayi, knowing exactly what he was going to do, made sure there would be no proof to connect him to the crime. Once at his home, located in the Fair Park neighborhood, Ajayi took immediate and violent action. He bound Lueck's hands behind her back using zip ties and rope and restrained her. He then began strangling her with his bare hands and continued even as Lueck begged him to stop. According to Ajayi's later statement, after her pleas, he then moved Lueck onto her stomach and wrapped a belt around her neck to continue strangling her until she stopped moving. The brutality didn't end there. Lueck suffered blunt force trauma to the left side of her head, which caused a skull fracture. Autopsy reports showed that Lueck's skull had a significant hole in it, and the injury led to brain hemorrhaging, which ultimately caused her death. The terrifying conclusion was that Ajayi didn't have any specific personal motive for killing Lueck, but he murdered her simply to experience what it felt like to kill. After taking Lueck's life, Ajayi attempted to dispose of her body and erase any trace of his crime. Initially, he buried her remains and some of her belongings in his backyard. He even discarded other items of hers into the Jordan River to try to hide the evidence. But even after committing such a horrific act, he couldn't stop himself from trying to bury the truth. The next day, when police arrived at his home to ask questions about Lueck's disappearance, Ajayi made a last-ditch effort to cover his tracks. He dug up Lueck's body and transported her remains to Logan Canyon, which is a remote and wooded area located outside of the city. There, he buried her in a shallow grave and hoped that the authorities would never find her. As police gathered evidence, they found DNA linking Ajayi to Lueck. His efforts to cover up the crime were falling apart, and his actions were revealing fast. Traces of Lueck's DNA were found at his house, in his car, and around his property, which showed she had been there and had likely fought with him before she died. It was becoming clear that Ajayi had planned the crime carefully, knowing exactly what he was doing, from the murder to trying to dispose of the body. Eventually, Ajayi was arrested and charged with the murder of Mackenzie Lueck. Throughout the investigation and subsequent arrest, he showed no signs of remorse. His cold indifference to the pain and suffering he had caused was both disturbing and frightening. For Lueck's family, friends, and the entire community, the arrest provided some sense of justice, but it didn't change the painful reality of her tragic death. Ajayi's trial was a heartbreaking affair, where the details of his crime were laid bare for the world to see. His defense argued that Lueck had agreed to meet him, but no explanation could justify the violent, premeditated actions he had taken that night. He had used his interactions with Lueck as a means to satisfy his darkest impulses, and in the process, he had taken away a bright young woman's future. On June 20th, Lueck's father reported her missing to the Salt Lake City police after not hearing from her since she returned to Utah.
Yeah, I'd like to get, if possible, have a wellness check done on my daughter. I've been trying to get a hold of her all week. I was just wondering if I could have somebody maybe go by her house and check on her.
On June 28th, Ayoola Ajayi was arrested and charged with the kidnapping, murder, and desecration of her body. Investigators found that Lueck and Ajayi had exchanged texts early on June 17th, with the last one sent at 2:58 a.m. Phone records placed both of them in a park around 2:59 a.m. Ajayi's phone also had photos of Lueck. Police searched Ajayi's property and found Lueck's belongings and remains, which included burned items and tissue in his yard. Neighbors reported bonfires behind his garage around the time of Lueck's disappearance. They also found a gas can in Ajayi's vehicle, which matched the one he had purchased earlier that day. After his arrest, Ajayi led authorities to a shallow grave in Logan Canyon, where Lueck's body was found on July 5th. Ajayi's trial was postponed, but on October 7th, 2020, he pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree desecration of a human body. In exchange, prosecutors dropped charges of kidnapping and obstruction and removed the death penalty option.
Are you entering your guilty pleas today of your own free will and choice?
On October 23rd, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole and 5 years for desecrating Lueck's body. In court, Ajayi apologized, but the family felt it wasn't sincere. Ajayi was also charged with a 2018 kidnapping after another woman came forward. He pleaded guilty to second-degree forcible sexual abuse and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. In addition, police discovered child pornography on his computer, which led to 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, although these charges were later dropped. The tragic death of Mackenzie Lueck highlights how quickly a life full of promise can be destroyed by someone with ill intentions. While Ayoola Ajayi's arrest and conviction brought some justice, no punishment can undo the pain he caused. Mackenzie's story serves as a reminder of the dangers of meeting people online and the importance of staying vigilant in an increasingly connected world. She will always be remembered for her vibrant spirit, and her loss is felt deeply by those who knew her.
My life has been changed due to the selfish, premeditated decision you made on June 17, 2019. Instead of planning my daughter's graduation party, I planned her memorial.
Breaks my heart knowing that she died alone in such a scary place. Tragically, she won't be among the graduates next spring.
This feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from, but unfortunately, it's reality.